Why do hackers hack you and me? Why is it that they're not just going after banks, governments, and the military? It's a really good question, and one that's kind of important to understand so that you can put some things in place to protect yourself, your business, and your family. So let's talk about why hackers hack. Hi, my name's Duncan from 65. I'm the CEO and founder. We've been working on Google Workspace and WordPress and the internet for well over 20 years, and I've got a pretty good understanding about why hackers hack. I want to help you understand this. So the first question is, why me? I mean, why do they hack me? Why do they hack you? And why are they spending time on that? Because you're not a bank, you're not a government. And so therefore, what tangible things do you have that these people could possibly benefit from for you? So the key here is to understand, well, what's their motivation? And there are two key motivations. So the first one is monetary gain. So let's talk about monetary gain. Everybody needs to earn money, and it's a significant one, okay? If you don't want to go get a job, well, there's other ways of making money. You can do it using a computer and not much else. It's pretty easy to Google how to hack a website and how to make money. So the first big thing is that they're after server resources. Server resources cost time and money. There's big data centers with those in, and they're actually very easy to come by and pay for, which is how so much of the internet now works, is they are leasing hardware from companies like Amazon Web Services, like Google, but it does cost money. And if you're trying to set up something that is very large, that is a large-scale distributed attack, having server resources is really important, but becomes very, very expensive very, very quickly. So by hacking, say, your website or your computer, they're going to get server resources that they can use for other means. So let's talk about website, for example. They might use your website to host some sort of bot, which sits there and then looks at other websites to find other weaknesses and multiply itself into other places. They call that like a command and control center. They might simply put malware onto your website so that when you get a visitor that comes along, it infects them, their computer, and then the cycle repeats itself and it gets to expand. And so because they are using your website and the server resources you're paying for, they're getting that for free and they're able to carry on with their work. The next one is what's called a distributed denial of service attack. Now, a DDoS, or a distributed denial of service attack, is one where they've managed to accumulate server resources across a significant number of websites, computers, devices, phones, whatever it might be, and then they are targeting all of that resource at one particular thing. Now, you can have a look for these in the news. You'll see there are various servers and services, Netflix, Cloudflare, various infrastructure providers on the internet have been brought down. You'll also see some of these things where government services have essentially stopped being able to work because there's been so much traffic pointed to them. The Australian census from a few years ago was essentially a human-led denial of service attack. There was literally so many people trying to file the census at the same time, they didn't have the capacity to scale up to process that. A denial of service attack is essentially so much traffic that it stops the service from working when they weren't expecting it to happen. And of course, that flood of requests means that the server's going to stop working, and whatever is the target of that, is potentially going to lose money and time. So it's a very big brute force effort to make that happen. The next one is traffic hijacking. And what they're looking for here is something where they can say, well, this is quite popular. If I can get that traffic to then go to my own site or to another site that I can put something on, then I'm going to automatically gain a bunch of people and eyeballs. And generally on that site that they've redirected it to, there'll be a purpose for that. So they'll be looking at a website for maybe some sort of phishing campaign or some other scam, or it'll have malware on it, etc. So something else that's going to give them the ability to put something much more targeted on there for the visitors from the site they've redirected. Ransom is the next one. If they can gain control of your computer, of a website, of a server that is important to you and your business, or you and your family, then they can ask you for money in order to reverse that and give you back your data, your life, your device. The very common ones in the past have been kind of those BitLocker ones where you've got an infection on your computer and it's stopped you being able to access your data. This also can happen on websites where they stop you and your site being able to serve traffic, and they take control of it and come and ask you for a ransom. So again, monetary gain. They're finding a way to hold you to ransom. The next big one is data gathering. The data that you might hold on your website or on your computer, etc., is important to people. Now, when there is social engineering involved, the more data points they can gather, the better and the more effective their phishing campaigns will become. So, for example, if they can find out that you have a Facebook profile and an Instagram profile, they can stitch those two things together. They can then find where you work, they can figure out where you bank, and they can figure out, say, your year of birth. Then all of a sudden they can put a picture together, send an email to you, and give you potentially enough information to con you that they are legitimate and they know who you are, and get you to give them more information in order to be able to then go compromise something else that is important to you. The other thing that they'll be doing is potentially trying to infect, say, your computer. If they can gather data off your computer, that might be what you're typing. So in other words, they might be able to gather passwords. If they can get to your file system on your computer, they can also pick up information with regards to what websites you visit, and potentially even the authentication tokens you use to log in to those websites as well. That might be your online banking, it might be a website, it might be TikTok or Facebook, right? But if they can get any of those, then they're likely to find a way to then be able to leverage that information to do further harm. So another motivation is simply for the laughs, right? There are kids out there that do this stuff just because they can, or because they're starting out in this industry of proving themselves to their peers, proving themselves in their educational journey before they start moving into, say, the monetary gain bucket. And that's simply just a case of changing the messaging on the website, putting something on there that shouldn't be there, but very obvious usually that these things have happened, very visible to see, and usually fairly easy to reverse out as well. The next one is political. Very often, much like the for the laughs for the kids, the political one is we need to put a message out there that makes a statement, and they'll try and do that on as many sites as possible. People will get behind that, and then they'll kind of expand that. So you'll see that kind of hacktivism, it's sometimes called as well, might be taking down a news site or something that talks against their views, right? Two sides of the coin. Hacktivism, there you go, I got ahead of myself there. So usually politically motivated, and that is much like the denial of service system. They're going to direct a bunch of traffic, for example, to a particular website to stop it functioning, or they're going to find a way to break into that website to change the messaging on it as well. And again, the services and the tools that they're using to do this are no more than a laptop and a phone. If they can also get a virus, or they can get access to your server, your website, your phone, your computer, then they'll be using that also, because it's connected to the internet, to help in their game and expand their reach. So APTs are Advanced Persistent Threat Actors, Advanced Persistent Threat. Now these are generally state-run or state-sponsored groups, so that would be your CIAs of the world and national organisations. Probably the most powerful is actually a French organisation who run cyber warfare campaigns. Very, very good at what they do. They gather lots of information about people and other governments and so forth. And that information that they can gather is very, very critical in being a step ahead of everybody else. So they will try and find stealthy ways to target those high value assets, other military, other government, banking, so forth. So in most cases, you and we're not even going to come close to their radar because we are small enough to not have any information that's of significant value to them. But by and large, APTs are looking for information which helps them and their governments and their nations be one step ahead of those around them as well. You really don't want to end up on an APT list, and you're not going to win, essentially. They're going to get in and they're going to do what they need to do. So the next question is, well, how do we get hacked? Like, how does this stuff happen? So the first thing, and the most common by far and away is compromised credentials. And that means that the hacker has probably purchased your password from a data link somewhere. Right now, most of us of any age have been on the internet now for at least a few years and probably more, with our history going back, into our teenage years, probably. And those credentials have been reused and used and used again. Services have been compromised and hacked. That information has been leaked and put out onto the internet. Someone has bought it, and then they are cycling through it, literally a spreadsheet of information on people, and they are using a tool to iterate over them and going to try them on the service that it came from. Or even if they can match that password and that username to, say, Facebook, they will also go try it on Facebook as well. It's because it's very common for people to use the same username and password on different services. We'll come to that in a sec. So the next one is that they've actually purchased a session from a hijacker. Now what that means is that when you log into something on your computer or on your phone, your device holds information about you so that you don't have to type your login and password every single time you go to the next page or you open the app again. That session is held open for you by some information on your device. Now, if your device gets compromised because you get a virus or something else, your security has been compromised, then they are going to be able to pull that information off your computer and they will put it out onto the internet to sell, right? Monetary gain. Information is power, that gives you money. And then somebody else is going to use that because they have a slightly different end goal to be able to then come access and hijack your session. The next one is they will brute force. So passwords can be very simple, and if you're using something less than 12 characters, it quite literally takes minutes to guess and iterate over all of the possible combinations of a password that's, say, 6 or 8 characters long. Literally minutes. It's very, very quick. And then, of course, they can test that against various tools. They can test it against various sites, and they can see if they actually get a feedback that says, yes, this user exists. Well, we're halfway there. And then they're going to go through and use those passwords and iterate over them to see if they can actually get past the barriers. Now, of course, that only works if you don't also have two-factor authentication. So when you log into something, if you don't then use your phone, read a code off your phone and type that in as well, then the hacker's got a much higher chance of being able to get in. So you must be installing two-factor authentication on your phone for everything that possibly gives you the option to use it. Because if the hacker doesn't have your hardware device, then they can't get into it. Having those compromised credentials helps them in a phishing campaign towards you. Like we spoke about earlier, if they can link up your profile, your email address to, say, your social media accounts, they can work out, say, where you bank. They can present you with a page that looks like your online banking but actually isn't, and ask you perhaps for your login details to your banking. You might type them in, they get those banking details, off they go to your legitimate bank website, log in as you, take your money, and that's the end of that. So phishing campaigns are a very big part of this. Data gathering, building a picture about who you are, and then using that information against you. So the second part about how we get hacked after the human element is poor maintenance and poor coding. And this is on your computer, it's on your website, it is everywhere. So first up, this is a mostly automated and random occurrence. And the reason for that is they are looking for websites primarily. They're just going through a list of domain names. They're just finding stuff in Google or wherever they're getting the list from, and they are iterating through it, testing a website, looking for a contact form, for example, trying the contact form, seeing what happens. If it doesn't meet their criteria, they'll just move on to the next one. If it does meet their criteria, then they'll investigate it further and find out what happens next. But it's quite literally a robot that is just going around on the internet looking for these weaknesses and looking for those things. So usually they just scan a list of domain names, go to the website, try it out, have a look, and see what happens. Once they find one that has a weakness, it'll then install itself, and it will do whatever they're going to do. Install the malware that goes on to the next visitor or deface it. Whatever their motivation is, then they'll do those things. And the final thing, if it's a website, let's say it's WordPress, for example, which powers a large portion of the internet now, the first thing they'll do is go and disable any plugin that has anything to do with security. They will whitelist themselves against it so that if the security scanner does run, it won't recognize what they're doing as a hack. And at the same on your computer, they will try and stop your antivirus software and your tools from noting that it is there. And bear in mind that all of these antivirus things are all the first line of defense, but they're always behind where the weakness is and where the hacker is, right? It's not a proactive defense because you can't possibly know what the hacker has got, what they're doing, until it's then been found, investigated and fixed. That's at the point when it then goes, say, to your antivirus supplier who understands it and creates a patch for it and then puts it out there to prevent that weakness being used again in the future. That then filters down into the supplier of that tool or that software or that hardware to then issue a patch through that process as well. So this very often means that the hacker has found something that they've been looking for that is malicious, that gives them access, but the good guys, the antivirus companies, the software developers and the hardware don't know about that yet. So they will use that, they will investigate it, do what they're going to do, and then that patch, that fix filters down the line, which is why your computer, your phone, etc. is always saying, hey, I've got an update that I need to install. That's what's happening, is they're catching up with the hackers. So how do we protect against all of this stuff, right? And it is going on all the time. What can you do? So if you have a WordPress website, the first thing you can do is get a decent hosting provider that provides the security and your backups outside of WordPress. It needs to come as part of your WordPress hosting plan. If you need to have a plugin that says backup or security or two-factor authentication and it's inside of WordPress, then it's fundamentally flawed. Okay, because the first thing that a hacker's going to do is they're going to disable those things as soon as they get in there. Or they're going to break WordPress in some way. And if WordPress isn't working properly, if the engine that all this stuff relies on isn't working, well, none of those extras are going to work either. It's just the same if someone breaks into a bank. The first thing they're going to do is try and disable the security cameras and to hide themselves, and disable the alarm that reports it to the outside world. It's exactly the same in website land. Okay, if that supporting software doesn't work, then your backups are going to be useless. Your antivirus and your intrusion detection is useless as well. On your devices, keep them up to date. Keep your computers up to date. Install the updates on your phone. Keep all of that stuff patched, installed, and working, right? If you don't, then it's likely, as we said earlier, that a hacker knows about that particular weakness and they will keep using that against you until such time as you install the patch that has been issued by your vendor. You should be using two-factor authentication on everything. If you log into something or you sign up to something and they offer two-factor authentication in their security and in your user account, enable it. Do not skip that step, because if your password happens to be the same or it gets guessed, then they don't have your device. And if they don't have your hardware device that they can hold in their hands and generate that code, then they can't go any further from that. So two-factor authentication is your best defense. Try not to use SMS-based authentication, where they send you an SMS and you type it in. Certain countries, it's a lot easier to fraudulently get an SMS off of a different number, i.e. spoof your phone number. So make sure you use, say, the Authy app on your phone, which generates those codes, and it requires no cell service or anything. So it works better actually when you're overseas, for example, too. Limit user access as much as possible. So, for example, in your business, you'll have a number of tools that everybody might need to do their job. Don't just go give everybody administrator access to everything, because that increases your attack surface. So only grant rights to things where people actually need it, and try and spend some time in order to moderate the amount of access that they have. What the result of that is, it moderates the amount of damage that can happen should their account get compromised. So the last one here is use a password that is different on every single service that you sign up to. Do not use your online banking password for your TikTok account. It might seem obvious, but it happens, and it still happens today. Don't get lazy with that. Make sure that you use a different password for every service. That means that you're probably going to end up using a password manager. We would recommend Bitwarden or Dashlane. Go and have a look at those, install them, get it on your computer, get it on your phone. It means that your passwords are very easily, readily available for you. You only then need to remember one password, which is your password to your password manager. And that one is the most important in your life. After that, once you're logged into it, it will complete the passwords for all of the websites and the services that you use, and it will help you generate unique passwords every single time. So that's all very well and good, but you've probably been on the internet. You're already watching YouTube, right? So if you're connected to the internet, then you should probably consider yourself hacked already. Unfortunately, it's the world that we're in. You've used a password at some point in the past. It has been found by somebody. It has been tested. It has been used. So have zero trust of everything and anything that you go and log into. Do not trust anything implicitly. Always question what you're doing, question what you're looking at, question the emails that you receive, question the websites that you land on that you thought were legit. Know what systems you use and how you access them. Know how everybody in your team, if for your business, accesses them. Know how your family, your kids are accessing those systems as well. For your business, centralize access as much as possible. This really helps with onboarding and offboarding. So for example, if you use Google Workspace, use that as your central authentication mechanism. It means that your team members log into Google once, and then from there, their Google account allows them access to the other tools that you use. Now, it's not possible for every single tool that's outside of the Google ecosystem, but it means that when you offboard that user, when they leave your employment, turning off that Google account actually turns off their access to everything around you as well in all those other systems. So really make sure that you're trying as much as possible to centralize that access and then secure that central access point with policies and management as far as possible too. Like I said, if you haven't been compromised already, expect to be compromised. At some point, some information you have that you've put into a website somewhere, that company is going to get hacked or compromised, and your data is going to be out there. In just the same way, you should assume that your business, your website is probably going to get compromised at some point too. Your target is higher, your potential is higher the bigger you are, the more visible you are, and the more sensitive data that you hold. So, healthcare providers, financial services, etc., they are always going to be a higher threat than, say, the local 7-Eleven, right? Because they hold different types of data that's more useful. That being said, your corner shop is just as valuable to a hacker in terms of server resources as a bank, because they can use that as just one of many of those parts in order to create a much larger distributed network that they don't have to pay for. So if you found this useful, thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe below. And if you want some help with Google Workspace or WordPress, please check out this link. We've got a guide for you which goes over the 6 most common mistakes in Google Workspace, which is really useful and worth a look.